Hi guys, so today we are talking all things pesticides. For me, there is no place for pesticides, and that includes insecticides, herbicides, fungicides in our home. And the reason for that is that the same mechanism that they use to kill the plant or the insect is the exact same mechanism or pathway that they use in our body, just in a smaller dose. So while we may not, like the fly buzz around and end up on the floor and die, it's still affecting the central nervous system, and it's still affecting the body in the exact same way that it would as it kills that insect. So when we look at pesticide use, in Australia, unfortunately, we use around about 1/3 of the world's pesticides. And we also have the highest pesticide resistance in the world, which is basically due to an overuse. And what happens is that over time things become resistant to those pesticides or insecticides or whatever they're using. Now the problem with that is then we tend to bombard and use more pesticide or a combination of pesticide, again, which hasn't been tested for human safety. Horse in the background. And they're incredibly cheap to use. So they cost around about $1.50 for a hectare to spray a broad spectrum pesticide over our food. So it's not really an issue for farmers to keep using and overloading our foods, which is why we see things like a strawberry, a non-organic strawberry, coming up with around 40 different chemicals or pesticides on that, as opposed to an organic strawberry, which is just the strawberry itself. So the fastest way that we can reduce our exposure to pesticides is to eat organic foods. And in the email you'll have a list of foods which are hugely sprayed in Australia, like strawberries, and things that are kind of, you can get away with not buying organic because they generally don't spray so much. So around about, our food industry or our crop industry is worth about 26 billion in Australia. 68% of that, or about 17 billion, is heavily sprayed. So when you think about how much pesticide use we're using, and ingestion being the fastest way of exposure, it's really a no-brainer to change over to organic fruits and veggies where you can. Now, changing over doesn't have to be expensive, and I have also got a video on my Facebook page of where I get my organic boxes from. $60 for 2 boxes. They're huge. They last us just over a week, and it's definitely a great investment. Also teaches you to cook seasonally and keep you on your toes, because you don't know what you're going to get in the box each week. The other issue is that we tend to get into this habit of spraying our home, and I want us to take a sec and think about the effectiveness of spraying, because we do things like run around with a can of fly spray for one little fly, when a fly swat could kill that without having sprayed pesticide all over the whole home that we're going to be inhaling. The other things I see is people spraying, getting the whole home sprayed for spiders, and there are so many better ways and even more effective ways that we can reduce the number of insects and unwanted spiders that we have around the home. The other thing is that when we use those sorts of spray, they have quite a strong residue on them, and they tend to stay around for a very long time. So if you've got little ones or children, they're going to be walking around on that, they're going to be picking up on their feet, they're going to be sticking their toes in their mouth, and they're going to be ingesting and inhaling at a much faster rate than we would. So when we think about using natural pesticides in the home, or not using pesticides, we really need to think about things like using barriers or physical barriers. There's so many things, for ants, for example, we can use anything from borax, turmeric, diatomaceous earth is fantastic, bit of cucumber peels, making sure there's no food scraps around. There's so many things that we can do and put in place around the house to stop ants, and ants are normally stick to one area. Again, with flies, it really is home maintenance and making sure that we're keeping doors closed, that our fly screens are in order, that we're not leaving food out or bins with lids off, or we're not creating an environment that is desirable for them to live in. So In the email, you'll see a list of different suggestions that I make for different pests, as well as some links there to places that you can go to or websites that you can see that have some really great information on how to naturally reduce your pest load. We also tend to overact a little bit when it comes to pests such as things like bees and wasps. Wasps often highlight that there's a bit of geopathic stress in the area, so you'll normally get a few things in that area. If you're getting wasps on the side, you'll normally find that bees and ants will go there as well. So making sure that those areas are extra covered and that you've got extra barriers in place for them. So I really think that pesticide exposure, especially when you're looking at pesticide exposure that's in our control, is really quite easy to reduce, because once you change over to organics, and there is incredible studies that show how much that reduces the pesticide load in urine samples over a 2-week period of just changing over to organic food. Obviously some are a little bit more persistent in the body, but that's really quite a small amount. So we can make a massive impact just by changing over to organics and stop spraying things in the home. So we know, even things like if someone's using fly spray in the home, we know that a child in the home is twice as likely to get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or leukemia. So there's so many things that we can just do simply. So I really encourage you to have a look through your cupboards and look at the pest management that you've got in there and think about the effectiveness or how much you actually need to apply to remove it. I want you to think about how annoying are those pests to start with. If they're outside, there's so many ways that we can remove them. If they're inside, we really need to look at what's going on inside the house. Like I said before, food, make sure we've got fly screens, make sure we're keeping those doors closed. And I think that within that you'll be able to reduce your pesticide exposure down to an acceptable level in the body. So this weekend, please go through, have a little look, do the work. I encourage you to do the work and have a conversation about, with your partners, with your loved ones, about how effective it is and whether you see the value in changing over and making the investment in going to organic foods. Any questions, always hit me up on the Facebook page at Building Biology WA, or you can email me at info@buildingbiologywa. Until next week, keep your windows open.